It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, if you're going to dance and go full standing dance, you got to adjust your camera so that people can actually see it, bro. You're shifting.
This desktop is set up.
Here, I'm gonna take myself out of the picture. He's got a full screen right now if you're streaming on YouTube.
I gotta seize the moment.
There he goes. Oh, hey. All right, let's talk about sports. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. That is the super dancing producer, Anthony Haney. I am merely the host of this radio show, Craig Hoffman. I typically don't try to tease stuff too much coming off the top, but coming up very quickly, Ramona Shelburne, ESPN, is going to join us coming up at 4:30. So super pumped to talk NBA playoffs with her, and also she is an NBA insider, so I will ask her if she's heard any scuttlebutt around anything Wizards related. So we will get into that with Ramona coming up at 4:30. But we start, Anthony Haney, with a mystery. Did the Washington Commanders try and trade up in the 2023 NFL Draft? It'd be so cool if we had a sound effect of some kind here. We don't have like a mystery sound effect. Did they try to trade up in the 2023 NFL Draft?
We are the Commanders.
That doesn't really have. Did they try to trade up in the 2023 NFL Draft? No, that was better, but still. Oh, maybe this one will do. Anthony, did the Commanders try and trade up in the 2023 NFL Draft?
Yeah, I almost pooted on this.
Oh, that wasn't cool. Why did I do that? All right. Apparently, according to Mike Jones, they did. Jonesy was on with Kevin Sheehan earlier today, and this is what he said about what he heard about the Commanders coming draft time last week in the first round.
What are you hearing about ownership?
That it definitely sounds like it's Josh Harris is going to be the guy. Obviously, there are questions about, okay, who's going to be here? You know, is Jason Wright still going to be here? Is Ron Rivera, is this a prove-it year? What does that mean? There was a lot of talk in the draft that they had made some calls about moving up, but to number 7, I was told. But at the same time, it's a lot to give up. And then there were questions about who gets to make the call on, giving up so much in mortgage in the future. This is a team that there's not a lot of clarity in the leadership, areas, because they're waiting. And maybe by the end of the summer, we'll have, everything resolved as far as knowing who it's going to be while everything else is finalized. It's going to be intriguing to see.
Well, to pull my best Kevin Hart here, Anthony. Hold on, wait a minute. That was a very bad Kevin Hart, but you at least get the reference, right? Okay.
I get the reference for
sure.
Okay,
excellent. Hold on, wait a minute. If that's the case, who were the Commanders targeting with the trade up? Because you don't just trade up to be like, ha, we did it. We got the 7th pick now. Yeah. No, you trade up with a purpose. So according to Mike Jones, what was the purpose?
Richardson was the name I had heard as well.
I'm sorry, you said who now?
Richardson was the name I had heard as well. When I asked around, a lot of people, they thought that that's who it was. Then obviously he did not slip, and so boom, it went back. They just stayed where they were and then didn't take a quarterback at all. I think that was basically the one guy that they would have been willing to. They didn't feel strongly about Will Levis. There were some people who liked Hooker, but not enough to go up, for anything like that. And they obviously passed on him too. But Richardson, I was told, was probably the target.
Oh, I hate that. I hate it so much. If they had been at 7 and taken Anthony Richardson, had he fallen, or let's say they were even at 4 and where the Colts were, and they had taken Anthony Richardson, I love the pick. I'm a big Anthony Richardson fan. I think that he is going to be a very good football player. I think that he is someone who has, obviously, this isn't a think. I know he has more athletic talent than anyone else who's ever signed up to play that position in the NFL because he's got more athletic talent than almost anyone that's ever signed up to play any position in the NFL. 10-second sidebar. I saw something crazy on Twitter today. Nolan Smith, the edge player from Georgia who went to the Eagles, had he been a wide receiver, he would have had the best raw athletic score of any wide receiver ever. When you combine size, speed, all that stuff, his raw athletic score was a 10 for wide receivers. He's a defensive end. Anyway, back to Anthony Richardson, whose raw athletic score, I assume, was also a 10. He is so intriguing as a prospect, but it's one thing to spend a top 10 pick on him. It's another to spend a top 10 pick that you acquired by giving up a possible future top 10 pick and a second-round pick when you already don't have your natural third because you went quarterback chasing last offseason. And so I don't know how serious this was. Like, sometimes you make a call just to see if someone wants to be an idiot. And sure enough, the Raiders have been a mark over the years for all kinds of variety of things. So you call the Raiders and say, hey, if Richardson starts falling, what would it take? And they probably say, well, according to the Jimmy Johnson trade chart. And you go, okay, thanks, never mind. We'll talk to you later. So it's never, one, because Richardson never got past 4, but 2, Richardson didn't get past 4, but 2, because I don't know how serious the Commanders would have been about trading up. But there's clearly something there. Marty Herney was the one who was reported really liked Richardson, and I think he might have wanted it out there. And certainly as a former general manager, he's got plenty of contacts of his own in the press. It seems like he wanted it out there that he wanted Richardson. Now maybe he doesn't believe in Sam Howell, and he wants it so that in the future, if Howell were to fail and this whole staff gets blown out, that he can be like, well, look, I knew, and he can go into his next interview and have a clean record on it. Oh, yeah, no, I wanted us to trade up to 7 and get, or I wanted us to trade up. Shoot, I would have traded up to 4 to get Richardson. If Richardson's playing well and Howell busts out this year. Busts as in bad bust, not busts out and has a breakout year. I don't know. But the idea that this was considered is, to me, not great. And it's not great because, as I talked about yesterday, this organization needs to have a 1-year plan. That's not very fun. And when I say a 1-year plan, it just means they shouldn't mortgage anything for the future. Their long-term planning is keeping everything, all the assets that they have in-house and pushing all decisions until later because that's the best thing for this organization. You need someone whose job it is to oversee the long-term health of an organization, and that person is typically the owner or a team president that is very in place and empowered. And with all due respect to Jason Wright, I think in an honest moment, Jason would tell you this. While he is planning on being here for the long term, and he is certainly hoping that, he has no guarantees. He hasn't had the chance to sit down with Josh Harris and be like, here's what I want. Okay, cool. I'm here for the next 10 years unless I really royally screw something up. Great. 5 years even, whatever. That conversation hasn't happened yet. Jason knows that. Ron has said as much in the press. He doesn't know. They're both doing a phenomenal job of operating with the best long-term health of the franchise in tow. But part of that is also self-preservation. What you don't want to do if you're Ron Rivera is make a trade from 16 to 7, blow a bunch of future capital, and have your new boss come in and be like, you bleeping moron, why did you do that? Now I'm going to have to hire another coach to dig us out of this crap because you're gone. So this was, I don't want to say, I'm not doubting Mike's reporting. And I think that, Mike would be the first one to tell you, you hear things and they can be true while also, you can investigate something without it. Oh, this is not Mike reporting. This was on the verge of happening. But they clearly were interested in Richardson. Perfectly reasonable position. They poked around on some level to see what it would take if he started to fall. And for multiple reasons, this was probably never close to happening. But what do you make of the news? Does this make you think any differently about how the organization thinks of Sam Howell, for instance? 301-230-0980. Take your calls next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Hope you are having an excellent Tuesday. Anthony, I'm not going to lie, I kind of came alive probably a little bit after I got here. I felt terrible this morning. I don't know why.
You're not the first person to tell me today that Tuesday feels like it feels like it's Thursday almost.
Well, at first it felt like Monday. Like big time felt like Monday this morning. Like I walked into my training session this morning at 7 a.m. and my client was like, it feels like Monday. And I was like, yeah, well, Monday was a bore. Yesterday, I don't know. I didn't feel, I never felt like I woke up yesterday. Just kind of sleptwalked throughout the whole day. Hopefully the show was good. Hey, everybody. Sorry if the show sucked. I think yesterday actually was a great show. I kind of felt like, I told Rachel this when I got home. Yesterday, I felt like, in the boxing movies, like pick basically any boxing movie, when they're just like splashing water on the guy's face in the corner in between rounds, like slapping his face. Gotta get up, come on, stay in the fight.
Get your head in the game.
Yeah, that's what I felt like in every commercial break. I was just like, Anthony, I don't think I can go back out there. But we're here. And then this morning I felt terrible. Like I went to go for a run and just like stopped after 10 minutes. I was like, nope, not today. Not happening.
Next time you're feeling down and out, just cue up Zac Efron and the High School Musical. Get your head in the game. I think that'll do it. I think that'll really get your head into the game.
Anthony, I can't wait till you're old and you realize that there's some days that there is no getting your head into the game. You just like try to survive to the end of the day.
That's fair.
Luckily, I don't know what it's like took a shower and feel a lot better now. So we're rolling. Hopefully we have a great show. We got Ramona Shelburne in 11 minutes.
Yes, sir.
We got Ben Standig in 40 minutes. We might have someone else later in the show. We got Take Command in the show today. How does the offensive line look, according to Logan Paulson, after the draft? It could look different if they traded up, potentially. I want to bring this clip back from yesterday, too, because we were just talking about Mike Jones and what he said, of course, of The Athletic about the Commanders apparently wanting to trade up for Anthony Richardson if he had fallen to 7, where he obviously did not. But remember, Martin Mayhew said this Saturday night after the draft. He wishes they had been more aggressive, potentially trading up.
I mean, trades were a roller coaster. I mean, I'm really excited to be able to make that trade, but then we lost out on some that were really disappointing. I wish I was more aggressive in a couple of situations, but it was an up and down thing with the trades. But we felt confident. That was something that we had talked about earlier. Obviously, the GM in Buffalo has a relationship with our staff, and we have tuned into that pretty much really the round before that. We talked about that trade, so it worked out. It went pretty smooth, and we're really glad to have him.
That about KJ Henry, their 5th-round pick, who they traded up for. But the thing is, I think people will connect those dots, and they'll say, "Oh, well, Mayhew said they wanted to trade up." Now Jones reports that they were interested in Richardson, and just he wished that they had traded up for Richardson. I still don't think those things go together. I still think he's probably talking about the potential to trade up maybe in the 3rd earlier, maybe in the 4th round earlier. But Anthony, I don't think that I genuinely think while most of the criticism is about their first 2 picks and people thinking they reached, I don't think they have any reservations, regrets, anything about those 2 picks. And honestly, I don't really disagree with them on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think they would have traded up for Richardson, if I'm being quite frankly. I feel as though Ron Rivera all offseason, he's been consistent. And I feel like when he starts something, he's very consistent with that. So last year when he was talking about swinging big for a quarterback, going all in, that's what he did.
Sure did. Didn't realize he had to swing so hard for Carson freaking Wentz, but here we are.
He positioned, Sam Howell to be the starter, so I think that's more so what I was led to believe, and I'm going to believe what Ron has been preaching literally all offseason. So I don't think it was Richardson. Maybe it was somebody else. Maybe it was, a Skoronski, a Darnell Wright, or a Broderick Jones, but I don't think, Richardson would have been there.
No, and I think they wanted Forbes. I think that they wish they could have traded down potentially because they know they probably liked Forbes better than others, but I don't think that was available. When I initially heard Jonesy's answer, and before I heard like the second question and Kevin follow up and hear that it was Richardson, I thought about those three guys. I thought about, offensive line. But Broderick Jones, I don't think fits their profile. They like guys that have played a lot of football. Broderick Jones has not played a lot of football. Skoronski fits because he's got position flex, and he's very, very good. And I think Darnell Wright fits what they want because he's played a lot of football. He's played multiple positions, and he can play right tackle. And I think they're much more likely or much more open to moving Wiley than necessarily looking to upgrade over Leno. I think they look at Leno as probably their best lineman. And right or wrong, we'll see, but they better hope it's Sam Cosmi, because if not, why the hell did you take him in the second round? When you thought he was going to be a right tackle, okay, well, now he's a guard. That changes the equation. Anyway, point is, like, I think that I'm actually happy that we stumbled bass backwards into the Carson Wentz thing. Yeah. I don't think people realize how much the Carson Wentz trade killed them in this draft. Like, this is obviously the one where that bill comes due. But they did not have a pick between 47 and 97. That is 50 picks. There's only 32 teams. That is how badly that Carson Wentz trade hurt them. And so when people are like, oh, they really missed on Quan Martin because they overreached, they should have just waited on him. They couldn't. If he was the guy they wanted, again, I think he was lower on, and Matt Miller told us this yesterday, right? He's like, he was lower on my board. It's a little bit of a reach, but my board is a generic board. I totally get why they took him. Safety was a position they could absolutely strengthen, and especially the way they play it, because their safeties also come down and play nickel, right? That Buffalo nickel spot. And I had a lot of people commenting on Matt's interview yesterday saying, how can you possibly say that safety was a big need for them? Well, Derek Forrest and Percy Butler are late-round picks that are young players that are still very unproven. Forrest was more up and down last year than people realized. I think he was pretty freaking good, but he definitely did not uphold the stellar standard of play he had earlier in the season, later in the season. Percy Butler's barely played, and Cam Curl has to stay on the field. So by getting Quan Martin, you get a guy who can spell all three of those guys. Actually, he will probably start over Butler. And then you can also take Cam out of that Buffalo role, leave him in the post more, or deep more, and that's going to take hits and wear and tear off his body so he can actually be available the entire season. So he's, of course, higher for the Commanders than he is a lot of other teams. And when you can't risk, we'll get him in 30 picks, we'll get him at pick 70, whatever it should have been, as opposed to pick 97, you can't take that risk. And, that's how the Carson Wentz trade hurt them. And thank God, by the way, that it was your third-rounder gone, because could you imagine if Wentz had played out the year and they had been stupid enough to give him those snaps, and had he been healthy, and all of a sudden that second-round pick is gone, and you got pick 70, but you wouldn't have picked between 16 and 74 or whatever it would have been. So, thank your lucky stars for Quan Martin, is what I'm telling you based off that trade. But I think they probably would have loved to trade up, maybe in the second round for an O-lineman, but that run started so early, I don't think they had the capital to do it. I think they probably maybe could have traded up earlier in the fourth round to get someone different, but when Mayhew says, I could have been more aggressive in different places, I do not think he's talking about first and second round.
What about a guy like Brian Branch, who was, also drawing some type of interest from, I guess, the Commanders?
Yeah.
He goes two spots before Quan Martin. What if that was a situation where he was talking
That's
about
one where I
being
wonder.
more aggressive?
Yeah, I wonder if there had been calls to get Branch instead of Martin, same position.
Yeah.
Right? That one I would hear. But I think when most people think about that, they think about O-line. And I don't think they were trading up to where Bergeron got picked in the early 30s. That would have been, they just don't have the capital. But could they have, did they offer, let's say, a fifth? And in hindsight, he wishes he had just given up the fourth that the other team wanted?
Yep.
Maybe. I think that's a good call. I think that's legitimate. All right, when we get back, though, different kind of trade on the table that we're going to talk about. Has Ramona Shelburne heard anything about teams inquiring about Bradley Beal? And does she think there are teams that will? We'll check what she thinks about that. And, of course, the NBA playoffs. Ramona Shelburne from ESPN joins us next on The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube as well, youtube.com/at the Team 980. Joining us now from ESPN, it is their senior NBA writer and NBA insider, Ramona Shelburne. Ramona, great to chat. It's been so long. Welcome. I guess, well, you've never been on this version of the show before, but great to have you back on our show.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate having you on.
Absolutely. So let's start with the series I presume you are covering with your LA bona fides in LeBron and Steph, Lakers, Warriors. When you saw these titans of the game collide so many times back in the finals when LeBron was in Cleveland, and LeBron ultimately goes to LA. Are you surprised that it's taken this long for them to collide again, or did you think that this era had passed of a LeBron-Steph playoff matchup?
Honestly, I thought this era had passed. Like, when these two teams played in the play-in tournament 2 years ago, remember that? 2 years ago in 2021? That was a 7-8 game. And I just didn't see either of them getting to a place where they'd be back to contend again, let alone this quickly. I mean, I thought LeBron, they both had injuries. LeBron had a series of injuries. He was getting older, right? And the Warriors looked like they had some work to do they lost that game, then they lose to Memphis in the next one, and they didn't even make the playoffs that year. So, I mean, they felt like a long ways away, even though, they ended up winning the title the next year, right? And the Lakers felt like they needed a lot, and they felt like they were kind of injury-wise, just going to be hard for LeBron to sustain his level much longer because he was already 36 back then. So it's really a treat that we get both these teams again, and also not just the fact that it's the Lakers and the Warriors and it's LeBron and Steph, but that they're both really good still.
Yeah.
I mean, Steph's 35. He still looks like he's 12, but when you look at photos of him now, he's you're like, oh no, he does look older. If you look at you look back at old Steph photos, and you look back at he really does look like he still looks very young, but it's kind of it's amazing that he is still at this level at age 35, and LeBron is still at his level at age 38. That's the real treat of this.
No doubt. And for LeBron, he's still at such an exceptional level, but it does feel like for the first time that it might not be his peak, even if it's still anybody else's peak. What have you seen both in deterioration, but his ability to manage that as he has finally at age 38 in season 20 maybe shown a sign of aging?
I mean, the only thing I see is that he can still do it. He just can't do it for 4 quarters in a 7-game series, right? So, in that Memphis series, it was almost like he punted game 5 back in Memphis. Okay, I'm not really going to be able to, on these every other – that was a brutal schedule, by the way. They had all this time in the beginning, and then it was every other day, but with a 4-hour flight in between. And I think, he put so much out there in game 4 in L.A., there just really wasn't time to recover for game 5 in Memphis. And it was that's what I see. I see, he doesn't blow by people the way that he used to be able to. He's still, really good. But he's just a little diminished in terms of explosiveness. But he makes up for that really in his basketball IQ. And then I also think it's just the ability to do it every night for a sustained period of time, the 4 quarters. He used to, in those series, I think the most memorable series other than the one that the Cavs won, right, was probably the last one when LeBron, he played all 82 games and every single playoff game, and he was going just a million minutes in every single game. And it was we were like, how is he doing this? And then he ended up leaving the Cavs right after that. But that was to me peak LeBron, being able to play at that level for that long.
No, I agree. Actually, my producer and I were having that conversation anyway. It was the absolute peak of his powers, and then he punched a whiteboard, and also he was facing Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and J.R. Smith's momentary brain farts. So that was that.
Yeah.
Ramona Shelburne from ESPN with us. You talk about the conditioning element, though. Steph his conditioning, and I live in that world, Ramona, as well. Like outside of doing this, like I'm also a strength and conditioning coach, and I just marvel at what he has been able to do and the way he's grown. When you talk to folks around the league, players, coaches, execs, is that something that comes up? Because I think it also obviously affects a playoff series, because the longer a series goes, the less conditioned the other team is to chase him around like that. And how has that evolved over, the last 5, 6, 7 years, and maybe even stemming from that loss in 2016 to LeBron?
Yeah, I mean, Steph is just bigger and stronger. Like, he really has put a lot of time in the weight room, and he's still, skinny, and he certainly wouldn't be considered, a strong guard at this point. But he is a lot stronger. He doesn't have a lot of bulk, but he's really changed, I think, his approach to training and stuff. And the thing about Steph is that, like, that game 7 that I just covered up there in Sacramento, like, we all think of him scoring a lot of points, being, this guy who hits a lot of threes, and he did hit 7 threes in that game. But I think that his ability to finish at the rim, that's a very underrated part of his game that he's also continued to develop, where, those attributes of Steph, those are going to age well. His ability to finish at the rim with a variety of, like, finishes, as a layup, those floaters he does, the scoop shots, and the three-point shooting, like, that'll age fine. That's not about chasing, that's not about running around and tiring people out. That's just skill. And so I think, in terms of both of them, like, they both have the kind of games that you wondered for a little while how that would play out as they age, but I think they've adapted really nicely. But I mean, LeBron and Steph, like, they both have kind of adapted their skill set nicely to how they have to age.
No doubt, and the IQ of both of them obviously is off the charts, which tends to help as well. Ultimately, how do you see this series playing out? I was listening to your buddy Zach Lowe's podcast, and they're talking about a million different matchups, but I think he and Jeff Van Gundy, who was on with him, also made a great point. Like, if Steph is the best player in the series, perhaps it's Golden State, and if it's likely Golden State, and if it's Anthony Davis, then it's likely LA. Is it that simple, or do you think there's more nuance to it?
I think that's about right. I was listening to that same one with him and Jeff Van Gundy, right? The Low Post Pod. My read of it is really just that the Lakers don't really have anybody that can guard Steph, and so then you have to take something away from him. You can't take everything away, but you have to take something away. So I would take away his interior game and just force them into jump shooting, which is a crazy thing to say when you're talking about the greatest shooter of all time. Okay, but he scored 22 points in the paint against the Kings, and that's the Kings let him do both, and that's why he had 50. And to me, I just think Golden State has more offensively than the Lakers. Like, the Lakers are really dependent on Anthony Davis and LeBron being great, and then hopefully getting great games here and there from Reeves or D'Angelo Russell, and they haven't been together as much. Like, I think at times like this, sometimes it really is just about who the biggest star is and who's the best player. And I have a really hard time picking against LeBron James whenever that conversation comes up. But the Warriors have an identity as a team, and they've had that identity for the last 10 years. They kind of know how they want to play. Even when they make changes to how they want to play, they can do it. And so I think that's ultimately that identity, that depth, that different ways to beat you. That's going to be hard for LA to overcome in this series. So this is a team that, while I think they're really good, they just got together. I mean, D'Angelo Russell had a great game in the closeout game in Game 6, but part of it, he's still finding his role.
Right.
He's still figuring it out.
Yeah, definitely. And those things are fluid, too, based off matchups. And he found it in the Memphis series, and if he can find it again against Golden State, great. But considering, like you said, this team is fairly new, like they cannot adapt as quickly as Golden State can, who's been together forever, the core of it. Ramona Shelburne covering the playoffs nationally for ESPN. Of course, you can read her work at ESPN.com, see her on NBA Today, SportsCenter, etc. etc. Real quick, I did want to touch on one thing from last night, and then I would love for you to put your insider hat on for me and sneak a Wizards question in because we're here in DC.
Yeah, please do.
But last night watching Philly beat Boston, I thought James Harden made one of the more impressive adjustments that I've seen, especially from a guy who for so long played a very specific way and then kind of took a while to adapt in Philadelphia. But he really struggled in that first series, or their first round series, to finish at the rim. And last night, he just was content after all these years of being threes and layups to take 2-point jump shots and just drain them. And he had 45 points, and they won. The question would be, Ramona, how sustainable is that for them if Embiid continues to miss time moving forward in that series?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think they're in a place where they gotta. I think they assume Joel's going to be back either the game 2 or game 3. I think game 2. But in terms of sustainability, like they don't even need him to score 45 like that. They need him to. They probably need him to get 25 or 30 because Embiid, even if he's back, I don't think he's going to be the same guy who's probably going to win the MVP later today. Like he's coming off a knee injury that limits your mobility, and I think they need Harden to just be a consistent force and aggressive. And it's I was frankly pretty shocked at how Boston played him last night. They were kind of giving him the switches and the matchups that he wanted. It was really weird how they didn't change that adjustment there. Like I thought there was sort of an underrated play there at the end where they, before the last shot, like they could have called timeout, right? They could have called timeout to set, but Doc Rivers didn't do it because they thought, Boston should really be trapping James, right? They should really be trapping Harden. And instead, Doc lets them play, and the Sixers James has the ball. He hunts down Al Horford for the matchup, and instead of trapping James, they switch, and he got the exact matchup he has on him. Now, Joe Mazzulla is a really good coach. He's going to look at that film. I think they will make that adjustment, but now you're going to have to contend with Harden and Embiid. And I thought them taking one of those first 2 games in Boston was huge for their confidence, was huge for the series, was huge for Embiid, really, just to give him some breathing room as he comes back from an injury. So I picked Philly in 7 in this series. It was a real toss-up to me just because I thought Boston was the deeper team in terms of talent, but they only played 7 guys last night.
Yeah,
they didn't even use their depth. So it's a weird series so far. That's not how anybody thought that game would go. And I think Boston right now has a lot of work to do coming back.
Yeah, you mentioned the matchups too. I thought it was super bizarre that Marcus Smart, who is as built as anyone to stop James Harden, was not on James Harden, and Derek White, who's a phenomenal defender. I know Zach had talked about at one point as like a guy who might even receive a couple Defensive Player of the Year votes, certainly first team all defense votes, but he's just too small for James Harden, and you have Marcus there. But alas, Joe Mazzulla, as you said, very good coach. I'm sure they will adjust. All right, real quick before we let you go, Ramona Shelburne, our guest, ESPN senior NBA insider. I will start with this quick one. Have you heard anything on the Wizards' lead executive search? We've all heard Tim Connolly's name floated out there. We've heard some others. Have you heard anything rumbling in terms of either names or timeline of when Tommy Shepard will be replaced?
No, the thing that I've heard, which is interesting, is it sounds like it's going to be kind of an internal search. Like they're not hiring a search firm, it doesn't sound like. And not that you have to, but that also changes the way you do it. Like the search firm, I always think I never quite understood the whole idea of it. Like I guess they do all the background checks and they vet people and they find people and make sure you comply with all the rules and stuff. But I mean, the names are names. Like if you're in the NBA, you kind of know who you should be talking to, and there's certainly agents who are going to be recommending people. So I think the other thing I heard is I think Coach Wes Unseld, I think he's going to have some say. Like he's really they're leaning on him quite a bit in terms of just what this franchise needs and the direction they need to go. And that's always going to be good because you want an alignment between the coach and the front office. So I think that's they don't have to rush. They can wait and see who becomes available, where everyone else goes with their decisions before they make choices. But they do have some pretty big choices coming up, right? I mean, They made a choice, whether that's free agency with Kuzma, whether that's, to keep going with this group. it's a big summer for them, and you want to make sure everybody's in alignment before you make big choices like that.
Well, so that leads me to the big giant question, which is I have heard they would finally, a year after they gave him a no-trade clause, be open to trading Bradley. So the question I would have for you, Ramona, is what kind of market do you think there will be for Bradley Beal at this stage of his career, coming off the season that he just had with the contract that he signed to?
Yeah, I mean, he's a great player, and he has the kind of skill set everybody wants. So I think there's a market. And people will downplay that because of the contract and because of, how challenging that can be to manage. But I think there's still a pretty good market for him. I wouldn't worry about that in terms of, would you have to take back money? Yes, because are you going to get quite the haul because of how much money you're going to have to weigh out for him? Maybe not, but he's still a great player. They would have multiple bidders. They would have multiple teams interested in him. I don't know if they go there yet. That you don't even really have that discussion until you decide who's going to be making those decisions, right?
Sure.
You can't. This isn't something you need to rush into just because the draft is coming up, right? You got to make sure everybody's really in alignment. And I think it's an attractive job, though. I've always thought that I've got an affinity for the district, so it's I think it's a good one for them to approach. And we always talk about this, there's names, Dame Lillard and Bradley Beal, these names that get out there for a long time. There's a reason why they're still there because they want to be. Like I've always thought with Brad, he likes being there the whole time. He likes playing for one franchise, and so I'll believe it when I see it. If we ever get to that stage.
No, I am with you. And again, he has control over the process because they gave him a no-trade clause, which, you know, bad business, but good loyalty. And I guess there are worse things you can be in life.
Well, he's certainly been loyal to them too, right?
Yeah. No, that's fair. They've also paid him a lot of money, which tends to help. He's an excellent player. It's just it's a weird spot. We've done many hours of radio on it, as you can imagine.
I know.
As you can imagine.
I can imagine.
Ramona Shelburne, you can catch her again. NBA Today, Sports Center, writing for ESPN.com. She's covering the playoffs nationally for ESPN. And Ramona, you and your affinity for the District of Columbia are welcome back anytime. Thanks so much for the time today.
I love it. Please hurry up and get back to the Eastern Conference Finals or something so I can get out there next year.
From your mouth to Ted Leonsis' ears.
There you go.
All right, we'll see you, Ramona. Thank you. Ramona Shelburne, everybody, with us from ESPN. Coming up next, back to the Commanders. We'll be talking with Ben Standig for Not My Beat. Do they still need to make a move on the offensive line? Ben was tweeting about it. We'll ask him to talk about it next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
You can listen to the Team 980
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live as well on YouTube at youtube.com/@theteam980. And it's 5 o'clock. You know what time that means it is.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. On a Tuesday, that very often, most likely, and today very much means we get to talk to our good friend, Ben Standig. Standig, how are you, sir?
Craig, I'm doing well. I got to say something else stupid here or silly to get Anthony to drop a new bite when I come on. It's that dazed and confused thing. That's my goal for today. See if I can do that.
If the goal of this radio show was to say something stupid on a daily basis, boy, I'd be in the Hall of Fame already. Like, what are we waiting for? We'll see if we can bait it out of you. Also, to live up to the theme of the segment, to add intelligence to our show, we'll see if we can get your opinions on the team that you cover. I'll start as broad as I possibly can. What did you make of the draft? The moves they made, the moves they didn't, and all of that in the context of what was actually available to them, not some Fantasyland draft that you just get to force the trades you want to, which you and I definitely did in many versions of our mock drafts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, in terms of a need-based evaluation, I think they hit on their primary needs: cornerback in the secondary, offensive line, edge rusher was something we talked about, and they needed a third running back to go with Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. Certainly those arguments for tight end or linebacker or drafting a quarterback, but those were maybe a little more secondary than the ones that they did address. So I think from that perspective, they did fine. Now, whether they got the better, intriguing players, other than Emmanuel Forbes, it feels a little, okay, it seems fine. Like nothing was particularly wow, that they did. And, Forbes is such an interesting prospect considering, how much of a playmaker he is, how much they needed that type of element in the secondary, but then simultaneously drafting him over guys like Christian Gonzalez and Deontay Banks, who other, the public boards tended to have over Forbes. That's not saying that was a bad choice. It's just to say that's what's going to make it interesting to watch that. So, I mean, I think they did fine. I just think it's sort of like kind of what they did in free agency as well. Like they hit their need, but it wasn't anything like particularly splashy or flashy, which, by the way, doesn't need to be. If all of these guys can play, I mean, similar things were being said last year about Jahan Dotson, Fedarian Mathis as well, and obviously Dotson, because he played, looked like he may be, the real deal. So, I'm not. It was fine. I don't think it was anything like terrible. I imagine the draft grades for them are not strong because Forbes and Smith in particular were picked. Martin, were picked higher than the public boards tended to show them. But that's what those guys think. It doesn't mean what they think.
Right. And I think you also tend to hear stuff after the draft about like, oh, this is why this guy fell. And there were some interesting notes on Gonzalez about, there's some teams that question his competitive drive and, his performance in big games. And those weren't questions about Emmanuel Forbes. And it does make you wonder about how, we all gather as much as we can. We gather as much intel as we can. We watch tape. We do all these things to try to come up with our evaluations, but it is a good reminder that there's stuff out there that we just can't know, and that teams typically do a better job because they have, multi-million-dollar resources to be able to do this that we just don't. And I also wonder, how much that plays into it where, there's just things about certain prospects that you can't possibly capture before the draft that tend to, for one reason or another, get leaked out after.
Yeah, and that's why it's always preposterous, especially for fans to go crazy over certain picks. Now, I think you can look at, if they had, say, drafted a defensive tackle or a wide receiver at 16, we might be going, whoa, wait a minute, what are they, what are they doing here? And it's not like, in case of Forbes, most mock drafts had him at a minimum going like in the 22 to 24 range. So it's not like he was going to be on the board for much, much longer. But you're right. The background stuff is what is really the difference between what even your Mel Kuypers and Dane Bruglers, who's our draft guy, know. They know a lot, but they don't know everything either. So that is the part that's a challenge, and only time will tell. Obviously, as to how these players unfold and whose evaluations were right and whose were off the mark.
Totally. And obviously the medical is the other big one that a lot of people forget about that can
sure.
be massive. By the way, speaking of getting stuff right, how'd you do on your mock draft?
It was okay, sort of a pedestrian effort from me. I think I finished about 40th out of 130 or something like that. It's funny. I was talking to a scout today that I showed him what I thought at that moment was going to be my final version, and just to see what he thought. And if I had stayed with that, I would have probably finished top 10. I made switches in the end, and blah, blah, blah. Always something. But, look, this was, people say this, probably some version of this every year that the draft is unpredictable. But I really do think this year was pretty wild when you consider that it's not like even Will Anderson was getting, must-have vibes from teams. He was essentially the first he was the first non-quarterback pick. So, it's kind of all over the place, but, all good. As long as I don't completely fall on my face, I'm not too upset.
No, those are the ones you kick yourself about, though. I had it. Why did I keep messing with it? But alas, there's always next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and so on and so forth. Ben Standig with us, of course, from The Athletic here on the Team 980. Ben, the big question I kind of want to tackle with you over the next few minutes here is about their offensive line. They did address it. A lot of folks think they did a poor job of that. Where do you make of where this, what they did and where that leaves this unit?
Yeah, so I think that Ricky Stromberg, he went off the board around the range where people had him. He was viewed as often like the third best center in this class, and we know from a long-term perspective they need a center option. They drafted Braden Daniels around later. Washington looks like they want to play him at tackle. Some people think he may ultimately be a guard. Impressive athlete who's got a lot of college experience. So we'll see how they do. So in a vacuum, they added two guys that have a chance to play. Maybe not as much this year, but down the line, and that's not a bad thing. However, I guess my quibble would be for the center spot in particular. Obviously they've had a mess the last 2 years with injuries. But they spent, decent money for a center on Nick Gates. They re-signed Tyler Larson. Even if they move on from Chase Rouillet, to have spent the money they did on Gates, who Rivera seems to believe is going to be a center, and Stromberg, who, while he can play guard, is also being viewed as a center, that's a lot of assets to have spent at that position in particular, especially when you can only play one at a time. So that's the part that maybe leaves me a little bit wanting something else. Was there a tackle prospect they could have taken in the third round instead? Even if it's somebody who's just a raw prospect that's going to take time, maybe for this coaching staff that just doesn't work because their future is uncertain beyond this year. But in terms of the choices themselves, again, Stromberg looks like a reasonable prospect and maybe the long-term answer, but that's just a lot of investment for one draft for me at that position in particular. But like I said, in general, both of those players, based on what the public boards had them, seemed absolutely reasonable and fine selections. And, we all know they needed more on the offensive line one way or the other.
No doubt, but the left guard position's the one that everyone kind of had circled, and whether it was addressed by taking a tackle and kicking Wiley inside or, taking a guard directly, they specifically didn't address left guard. How high is their confidence that Chris Paul or Sadiq Charles will be ready and able to stay healthy? Or do you think this is going to be a Charles Leno type situation where they wind up signing a veteran later on in free agency after they cut Andrew Norwell and create the space to do so?
Certainly they need to look at it. I don't think that should definitely be there. Now, whether they think that Chris Paul is ready to start after playing one game last year, kind of the Sam Howell deal, that seems like a lot to ask. Sadiq Charles, at times when he has played, has looked pretty good, but it's been 3 years and he's never been able to maintain a role with this group beyond just being a backup. So that seems like an incredible amount of uncertainty at that spot. And when you ask at the top, what do I think of the draft? That's one of the things that's even if you factor in free agency and I look at the offensive line, which to me was just overwhelmingly the biggest thing they needed to fix, especially once they determined that Sam Howell was going to be the starter. I don't know. I mean, they know way more about Wiley and these rookies and Gates than I do, but it feels still somewhat underwhelming. There's no obvious big upside talent on the line. So, yeah, I'm kind of, all right, we'll see. But, yeah, the left guard spot is, to me, of the starting 22, that's definitely the biggest question mark right now.
And then the other one that people are freaking out about is Ben gets very choked up. Is that going to be our bite, Ben? Is you just dying in the background?
I was trying to hide that. I had to walk outside to talk, and I was at a coffee shop, and there were so many people. But yes, exactly it now.
And now you're getting attacked by pollen.
Pollen, car pollution. Who knows? Maybe somebody gave me the evil eye and started making me cough when they knew I was on the radio.
Anthony, mark that. Guess we got a clip now. Ben just absolutely eating it in the background and me asking him a question. Fantastic. I only highlighted it because you asked for it. I normally would have just let that slide under the radar. Alas, if I can potentially get my thoughts back on track, don't let the ADHD radio host get distracted. That's a terrible idea. The other thing that folks are freaking out about, though, is Leno. I'll just ask you this to start. Where are you at on him?
I mean, I think if you look at the tackles around the league, he's fine. Like, I don't think he's spectacular by any stretch. He's fine. I think the issue is that, there's no longer a Brandon Scherf Pro Bowl or somewhere else on the line. And you have, we'll see what Nick Gates does at center. We'll see what happens at left guard. We'll see how Sam Cosmi transitions to guard himself. We'll see how Andrew Wiley plays here when it's not Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback evading pass rushers. Like, there's just no one thing in the line where you're going, either this is a proven stud or you drafted a guy in the first round where you think, wow, there's a lot of upside here. So I think that's where the problem for me with Leno is. Like, he's being viewed as, I guess on some level, like the linchpin. But, he's been fine, but we've seen deficiencies at times for sure. So I think, if this was even another situation, you might be looking at him as a potential cap casualty, especially if they had drafted someone higher to replace him. But, here he's, arguably their best lineman, which is a not ideal spot. That's less, again, about him and more about the whole line overall, I think.
No, I agree with you on that. Charles Leno's a fine football player, but he shouldn't be your best. And especially, I do find it funny when people think that this line has been somehow bad for Dan Snyder's entire ownership. And I'm like, you do realize they went from Chris Samuels to Trent Williams, right? You do remember them drafting Brandon Scherf, right? I think people have actually been spoiled here and not realize that this is far more typical around the NFL than not. All right, last two things for you. First, how many starters for this team on opening day, and let's assume health here. Like, if a guy gets hurt, at the end of training camp, they bring in someone else, a veteran who gets cut elsewhere, like not counting that. But how many starters do you think are on the team right now out of the 22 versus someone they might bring in the back end of free agency here?
I'll probably say 21 without even identifying another position, just that sometimes that can happen. I mean, we've already discussed the left guard scenario. That, to me, would be the most obvious one. Is there a world where, say, Logan Thomas ends up getting released and they sign another tight end, a veteran? Maybe. That feels a little longer odds than I would have thought maybe 3 months ago. Other than that, I don't. I know people keep claiming for a linebacker, but they like Barton, and they signed him pretty quickly in free agency. So I think they see him as that guy next to Jamin Davis. We obviously know the defensive line's good. They just added secondary pieces. So I'll say one, but that's almost just to not say zero as much as anything else.
I think that's fair. And then last one, total wild card out of left field. I hit Phillips with this yesterday. I'm going to close with you as well on it. What comes first? More definitive ownership news, like there's some kind of formal announcement that Josh Harris will be voted on or something like that, or the schedule release on May 11th?
Good question. I'm going to say the schedule release. I mean, will there be some intermittent reports? Sure. could even be one from the Athletic. But in terms of like, there's a definitive agreement, they're going to take a vote on this date, things like that, I think we're probably still a little bit of ways away.
Is that a preview? Is something coming, Ben? Do people need to subscribe to The Athletic right now?
Always need to subscribe right now, but no, nothing in the hopper from me at a minimum. But I'm just saying, like, this, there's constant. I mean, that's what happens here when there's no real news. People start going for the incremental stuff. So that's all I'm saying.
Your bosses thank you for not missing that layup.
There you go.
All right, go back inside your coffee shop. Although you really do love some afternoon caffeine. Do you sleep okay? I worry about you, Ben.
Oh, you should worry about me for more reasons than my caffeine intake. But yes, it's on the list.
All right. Well, sleep helps a lot of things. So maybe let's lay off the caffeine at 5 o'clock. But at least enjoy the coffee shop and get out of this polluted air that almost murdered you midway through the segment.
Deal. This is what happens when I ask for something and then the universe says, "Okay, well here you go, sucker."
All right, man. We'll see you. Thanks.
See you guys.
Ben Standig, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show. I thought, Anthony, we were going to lose him there. I was nervous. I was scared.
You didn't tell him to clear his throat when he started coughing.
Yeah, I mean, thing is, he tried to, in the background, get away. I heard him. There's no doubt.
Loud, I guess.
Because what he should have done was mute his phone.
Okay.
And that way he could still listen to my question. Because that was the problem.
Yeah.
He couldn't listen because unlike you, who has a button right in front of you to mute your microphone, and your headphones and the speakers in the studio still work, especially if your microphone's off. Because for those that have never been in a radio studio before, what happens is when you turn a microphone on in the studio, we do have like loudspeakers. So like when I turn off my mic and we go to commercial, the program, as we call it, what you hear is playing over the speakers. That mutes when I turn on the microphone, so there's no feedback. And Anthony has a nasty habit of when I summon him to talk on the air, or when he wants to talk on the air, to turn on his mic and the first thing go, ahem.
It was the pollen and mucus and yeah.
Yeah, and Ben, poor Ben, he doesn't really have that. He has a phone where the speaker and the headphone part are attached. They're one device. It's called a phone. It doesn't look like this, though, because it's not an iPhone, because Ben is an Android man.
But have you ever seen someone do the dab? Like, if I'm on the phone,
Yeah,
I got a cough, I'll go, you see that? It's real quick.
Yeah, no, I've definitely done it.
I mean, Ben might not know about the dab because, again, he is 100 years old.
Yeah, there's that too. We should call Ben back and be like, Ben, do you know about the dab? I do feel like the dab had its moment enough that like crossed into pop culture and NFL circles that he definitely knows what the dab is. Yeah. Does he know it can be used to avoid coughing or sneezing into a phone?
That's a great question.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But he was trying to hear the question. That way he didn't have to go, hey, sorry, I was having a coughing fit. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
He just
worth the effort.
Yeah, the mute button would have been his best friend there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no. But we got our hour opener.
Yes, sir. I got it.
So we just got to make sure we can, put that together by next week.
Yep.
You got it marked?
I got it marked already.
In the folder?
Not in the folder yet.
Okay.
I'm recording right now, so.
Oh, okay. We got to end the segment.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're gonna do that momentarily because I did it now. It would be a little early. Got to keep talking for about 90 seconds here to make this the math, if you will. And in that 90 seconds, I will tell you that if you are just tuning in, you just missed Ben Standig, and he was fantastic amidst the coughs. And you can rewind, listen to that on the Odyssey app. You can also go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/@theteam980, where we stream live each and every day for all 3 hours of the show from 4 until 7. And you can rewind on that. It's DVR style, so that's pretty neat. And you also missed Ramona Shelburne at 4:30, who was fantastic, not just on the NBA playoffs and LeBron and Steph and kind of their greatness and the fact that we get to see them play again, still kind of at the peak of their powers, real close to it, the peak of almost anyone else's powers for sure, but also had some good insight on the Bradley Beal trade market. So you can rewind and check that out. Or if you just want to wait until later, Anthony, of course, will put it up in podcast form in the Hoffman Show podcast feed, which now, Anthony, has our updated artwork. The time is correct again on the show.
Yes, sir. I've
So
seen it.
we love that. There's one other thing I was going to say. Oh, what's coming up next? Great question. Why'd you wait so long to ask? So this offensive line discussion, I would like to continue it. And I would first, before we take calls on it and talk about it with you at 301-230-0980, I would like to get the word of one Logan Paulson. He, of course, of Take Command fame and a man who loves offensive line play. We will talked to Logan. We did the podcast. We'll play for you the conversation between Logan and I, talking about the Commanders' offensive line, talking about their selections, what he likes, doesn't like about Braden Daniels, what he likes, doesn't like about Ricky Stromberg, and where that leaves this offensive line now. That's next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
Deep.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Also hosts a show called Take Command. You might have heard of it. A podcast we do that's not so little anymore. Myself and Logan Paulson. Releases twice weekly, typically Tuesdays. This week with the draft, we actually put our episode out first thing Monday morning, but we still want to give you a Take Command Tuesday here on the show because we'd like to bounce off of this conversation and the one we just had with Ben Standig into some phone calls with you at 301-230-0980. The question you will be answering on that there phone line is whether or not you think the Commanders need to make another move on the offensive line or whether you think that they are fine and set with the moves they've made so far this offseason. But to inform that conversation, let's let you hear from Logan because, well, he's very, very smart when it comes to offensive line play. The O-line segment from our podcast this week, talking about Ricky Stromberg, about Braden Daniels, and where the offensive line goes from here.
Yeah, I really liked Ricky's film. I thought he was almost in that kind of Tippmann, Schultz, the kid from Minnesota. He was almost in that tier of guy. Whippler, he was kind of. I had Whippler in that tier, and obviously the NFL didn't agree with me, but he was very close to that tier. He was definitely like the fourth center, and I thought he was a very good football player, good athlete, big guy, and I think that's something they prioritize. Is because when I talked to guys at the combine, they were like, "Oh, we like big centers or whatever." So he fits the mold. I wonder about his high end athleticism, but I think he's athletic enough to play center. I think he's a smart guy, shows up on film, and he's tough and nasty and he's gritty. And I think he's, again, understands angles at a high level. Ron said he thinks he could play guard. I don't necessarily agree with that. He played guard as a freshman. Usually if you're playing guard as a freshman, you move to center, it's because there's like a hip strength issue that prevents you from being truly excellent at guard. And I think he's got a little bit of that, little stiff in the hips, that prevents him from having that elite kind of guard bend. But I think he's a center. He's a good center. I think it's a little interesting that you have 4 centers on the roster right now. I talking with people on the beat, one of the things they said is that, hey, they've had a lot of injuries at center and they really value the center position. So me personally, if I'm making a team, I don't value the center quite as much just because I feel like I want a guard to play that. And I want to teach Sadiq how to snap. I want, something like that, but he's an excellent football player, fits the mold of the kind of guy they're looking for. And from what I understand, has played a ton of football in the SEC. And again, like if you look at the lists, man, playing a lot of football against high level of competition with a leadership role, that's something we previewed on our show, and they seem to be following that game plan to a T here.
No doubt about it. And, you mentioned the injury things the last couple of years. Like this is the time of the year where there's 90 guys on the roster. When push comes to shove and they have to narrow it down. And with the new CBA, like I think it takes like this starts this year. You go straight to 53. So you're going to have a bunch of guys, which I actually like because you have that guy that gets hurt in the third week of camp and you're already past the first round of cuts. And all of a sudden you're trying to bring a guy back, but you had to cut him. He signed somewhere else, and you've invested an entire spring and couple weeks of your fall into a guy. And it's like, oh crap. Well, there went our depth. To be able to keep 90 guys until the last possible second, I actually kind of like. And now that cut day is going to be brutal. But I don't have a problem with them going a little heavier at that position, considering and having a bunch of guys ready, considering the issues they've had the last couple of years. Realistically, though, it's the same conversation about Chase Roulier as we just had about Kendall in terms of the contract. Chase, you add in the fact that nobody really knows if he's going to be able to really play. He's barely played the last couple of years, and these injuries have been pretty devastating by all accounts. So, this is your guy of the future. If he can overtake Larson, who they played a lot better when Larson was in last year. Like part of the reason the O-line fell apart last year was because they got past Roulier and then past Larson.
Right.
That's where their issues came in when, Nick Martin came in and just wasn't up to that task.
Right.
And a couple other guys I feel like might have even played last year. But if you can get a guy in Stromberg ready, and he's anchoring that center spot, and you can get him some reps with Sam. They've got the coverage stuff taken care of. That to me is the biggest question. Is like you've got a second year quarterback and now a rookie center in a brand new offense to everybody. how do the line calls work? How do they make sure that they have their protection set? Because that was also an issue last year. And part of the reason, like everyone wants to crush Charles Leno because of the Giants game. And it's like, well, they had a bunch of bad line calls in that game.
Right.
And Leno was doing his job, and he was
Yeah.
that job was unfortunately to leave someone unblocked who ultimately sacked the quarterback by running right past him. And so making sure that stuff is covered is important. And I don't know how EB runs it, whether it's a center or base system or a quarterback base system. But the fact that both those guys are going to be young is an obvious question mark, but it's not a deal breaker by any means. Put it that way.
Sure, yeah, and it is a little interesting, to have all those centers stockpiled, and like you mentioned, Chase, his future is probably in question now more than ever. I also think it's interesting that because I do think they believe that Nick Gates is more of a center. So you brought this guy in free agency and you paid him a decent amount of money. So I think that's also an interesting thing. Just the dynamic of that group now, because I do think Larson is probably more of a center only. And again, I'm not. My experience with that position is that it's very rare to carry true centers on the roster. You're always carrying kind of flex guys. And like I said, I have some questions about his ability to flex. Like the size is there to flex, but I wonder about, how he is. And they'll probably get him some reps and we'll know pretty early on if he can do it. But I just think it's a very unique situation. But in terms of Ricky, I think he's a good football player. And, I'm happy he's a Commander.
Definitely. All right. So let's do kind of the same thing we did at corner. Let's go ahead to the fourth round. Let's talk about Braden Daniels. And then let's kind of shuffle the pieces. Where are we along the offensive line? What do you make of the Daniels pick?
So this one was one of the tougher picks for me in the draft. And again, like I've grown on it since my initial evaluation, but he was one of the first guys that I watched in the draft process. When I say first, he was probably one of my first 20 guys. And I remember watching him at Utah, and you saw some really high level explosion, some really high level athleticism, but he was very inconsistent. And I kind of thought the only way that he makes it is if he moves into guard. So when they made this pick, I was like, he's got to play guard or center. He's a tackle convert, much like Sam Cosmi will be. And I thought, man, that is very, very redundant. Like you have now all these developmental guards, guys from different positions that have upside, obviously, but definitely aren't quite there yet. And then Ron gave his presser and said that basically Travell Wharton thought he could play tackle with the right kind of coaching and kind of cleaning up some of his footwork stuff. And I have a lot of respect for Travell. He's played a long time. He's a smart guy. He's got a good head for football. So I said, well, if Travell thinks that, I'm going to go give it another look. Because I'd also talked to a lot of my O-line buddies around the league, and two of them out of the three guys I talked to said they don't think he can make it unless he's playing center. So obviously not big ringing endorsements for this player. So last night I went back and I was like, I'm just going to grind some tape. And I took about 2 hours and I watched him exclusively. And what stood out to me is that he has really, really, really top flight athletic qualities. And so when you're looking at tackle specifically, you say, do they have the length or do they have the athleticism? Now, he's not a long player. He's got 33-inch arms. He's 6'4". He's 295 pounds. So not a big, long guy, but his foot speed is tremendous. And he does stuff every couple of plays. You're like, that is elite NFL tackle play. He's doing it in the Pac-12. He's doing it against kind of lesser competition, but he does have these flashes where you're like, that's pretty special. And the footwork and the foot speed, I shouldn't say footwork because that's a different thing, but the foot speed and quickness and the athleticism in his feet is tremendous. So like there's a play, for example, where he's on a backside cutoff on a B block and the linebacker tears out of there. And he actually runs the linebacker down, kind of does that Trent Williams reach around block, and is able to get to his front side and seal it off and let the running back hit it for a 20-yard gain. Like that is elite athleticism at the position. There's another one where he sets the three technique because he's expecting a stunt. He gets speed off the edge from the defensive end, and his feet are just magically fast. He's able to get back, block the guy up. He delivers a really good kind of explosive pop from the hips in short areas, so he's able to create a lot of movement. But he does miss a lot. You know what I mean? He does. I don't say miss a lot, but like he's got to be perfect, and if he's a little bit off, it's a miss. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So I've kind of come full circle a little bit. I still have my doubts about the prospect playing tackle, but I do think the athletic footwork, hip dexterity, and just general pop to his body, just general twitch to his body is very, very good. He's played a lot of football, right? Kind of fitting in that mold. And if Travell thinks he can get him there, I'm going to trust Travell on that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my thought on him.
Yeah. So where does that then leave the offensive line? Starting
Right.
wise, Leno at left tackle. You have this battle royale at left guard. Chris Paul. Who else in there? What's his name?
Sadiq
Sadiq.
Charles.
Norwell is still technically there, although everyone anticipates he's not going to be there much longer. At center, you have the four guys that we've talked about. Right guard is Cosme. Right tackle is Wiley. Do you think that they're now looking in second wave free agency to add someone else, to add another veteran? Like what, or do you, and if not, is that good enough on the offensive line?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I would have probably gone someone, position flex is big for them. So I do think Daniels, like we talked about, like I've talked to coaches who thinks he can play center. I think he can play guard. They obviously think he can play tackle. So he does bring some position flex, which they value. At some point, I probably am just going to draft a tackle. I think Ty Warren is his name from Pittsburgh was on the board. He reminds me a lot of Morgan Moses in the 4th round. I think he can be a starting caliber player. Had an injury the 4th game of this last season at Pittsburgh. And, prior to the injury, looked like he was going to be a first-round draft pick. And that guy's on the board, and he's a true tackle. You lose some of the position flex, but I would like to have a guy with that skill set on the roster. Now, you do have Cornelius Lucas, right? He's still on the roster. He's an excellent swing tackle, very, very good, can come in a pinch. But you really only have 3 guys that can play true tackle. 4 guys if you think Braden Daniels can do it. If Braden Daniels can do it, I think you feel much better about where the offensive line is at. But like I said, I do have some reservation about where he's at and where he needs to go from a consistency standpoint to kind of establish himself as a guy who can play tackle in the NFL. Because they do this pretty regularly. They brought in Sadiq Charles, tackle ends up moving a guard. Chris Paul, tackle ends up moving a guard, right? Sam Cosme, tackle ends up moving a guard. And he is very much in that same mold of guy. I will say he's got a little bit shorter of a torso, which helps him kind of sit the power rushes off the edge a little bit better. Like think about Morgan Moses, Trent Williams, like literally any good tackle. They've got kind of this really tight torso so they can really kind of brace their midsection. He's got that look about him. But again, it's a little bit of a jump. I think he's physically capable of doing it, but it's a little bit of a jump. And I think he's probably going to settle in at guard, and you kind of run into the same problem where you have 4 centers, you have, couple
852 guards.
Yeah, and that are kind of developmental guys that all have a lot of potential, but none of them have actually done it at a high level in the NFL. And but if Braden can do it, if Braden can play tackle, then you feel much better about it. And again, like I just don't know if they value the tackle position the same way that I do, and that's perfectly fine. But I do think in this era of kind of specialized football, tackles play tackle, guards play guards. There's a reason they're built differently, right? Because they have to handle different athletic, trials and tribulations. I think I would look for a tackle potentially in the 3rd wave of free agency or 2nd wave, whatever it's called. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, obviously a lot of tackles went over the last couple of days, and that's going to cause some veteran fallout. And is there a chance to get some more, experience in that room and to get it at a tackle spot potentially? But you also do have 2 veteran tackles. Now, you don't have a lot of depth, but you do have that veteran, know-how, hopefully, at tackle. And the thing that I'll say about this with Wiley, and I know you like him better at guard, and maybe he is better at guard, but Eric Bieniemy's coached him, and Eric Bieniemy is the OC, and Eric Bieniemy brought him here. And I we agree on this. The best offseason acquisition the Washington Commanders made was Eric Bieniemy. He's going to make literally everyone better. And if Eric Bieniemy trusts Andrew Wiley at right tackle, fan on Twitter who watched a little bit of tape and read one PFF article, you don't know as much about Andrew Wiley as Eric Bieniemy does. And I say that respectfully, but neither do I. Neither does Logan. And, Logan knows a lot. I know a little bit. And you might too on your couch, but we don't combined know as much about Andrew Wiley specifically, who's coached him every day for the last couple of years, as Eric Bieniemy. So if Bieniemy's cool with him at right tackle, I'm just going to kind of default for right now. And if we're wrong about that by the time October, November rolls around, then, that's Eric Bieniemy. And, at that point, they're probably not having a great season, and this staff is not going to be long for their jobs. That's just the reality of this 2023 season with the ownership situation and everything else going on.
And I just want to make a point of clarification. Like, I do think Wiley can play tackle, especially with Eric Bieniemy calling plays, because Eric Bieniemy knows what he's good at and knows how to insulate him. Like, for example, like Tyler Columbus was here in Washington and had a very productive year in 2012 because Kyle knew how to call games to fit his skill sets, right, and to elevate him. And I do think that that's what you're going to get a little bit here of. Like, is he a top 10 tackle in the NFL? Probably not. But there are a lot of guys who aren't top 10 tackles in the NFL that are elevated by the play caller and elevated by scheme. He falls in that category, and that's totally fine. And it's the same thing with Leno. Like, I personally think Leno is better. I think he's better than a lot of people think. I think he's like probably a top 15 tackle, which, you know, people probably freak out at. But when you look at him down to down, it's pretty damn good. And so you got two guys that are solid starting caliber tackles in the NFL that will be elevated by a play caller who knows how to utilize play action, who knows how to utilize the screen game, knows how to develop a cultivated rushing attack that insulates the passing game. And I think you're going to be okay. I personally, this is, again, my personal perspective, and I'm entitled to my opinion. I would like to have a guy going into camp with kind of more tackle-ish traits, which again is my perspective, and they obviously don't think that's necessary. So
yeah, I would love to have a fourth guy.
Yeah, right.
To say the least.
And they think Daniels is that guy.
Right.
Like I said,
totally.
There is a world where he is that guy because he does have this tremendous athleticism. I think it's harder for me to see the projection to tackle, but it is possible, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So. The last thing I would add too is I expect the quarterback play to be better this year. Like, I know it's Sam Howell and he's had, 16 NFL passes and the whole deal, but between the play calling and the fact that, like, how much of their offensive line issues last year were because Carson Wentz held on to the football way too damn long. And like
quicker release too. Like,
Sam gets the ball out. Like, it's part of who he is. Like, will there be games where there might be a lot of sacks because he's young and confused and the defense throws something at him that melts his brain a little bit? Probably he's a second-year player. But overall, compared to what Carson did last year, and even Taylor, like, and that was a huge problem with Taylor by the end of the year. He was holding the ball way too long. And so, you can't go back and the same people complaining about that. Now I'm getting too lost in the internet, Twitter and YouTube comments and everything. But like, same folks that were complaining about the quarterback play and Scott Turner, when you replace that, like, believe it or not, some of the same players that you're now complaining about will be better. Like that's how that works. So
absolutely. I totally agree. And so again, like, I think this is okay. I'd like another tackle body, but I think, like you said, the combination of a quarterback with a quicker release, a coordinator that hopefully knows how to elevate that skill set and elevate the skill set of the offensive line, I think you're going to be. And again, the other thing about this offense is I saw something that I think is a beautifully articulate way of talking about offense in the NFL. And I think the head coach for Indianapolis said this, and basically said, everyone runs the same passing concepts. The thing that differentiates offense is protections and how nuanced and advanced your protection schemes are. And so if that comes in and if that's executed at a high level, I think you're going to be in a much better spot, because we also got to talk about how, Matt Scout, who I like a lot, I have a lot of respect for, was very traditional in his approach to A, run scheme, and B, protections. So what does this offense look like when you give these guys some more nuance in that department? Hopefully it elevates them also. So I do think there is a path through coaching and through scheme where the whole offense is elevated, and including the offensive line, by enhanced protection and enhanced offensive play calling.
Agreed. Take Command. All right, so that is from Take Command earlier today, and actually came out yesterday. So you can subscribe to that anywhere you get your podcast. What you can't do on the podcast, but you can do here on the radio show, is give us a call to talk about it. You can leave a comment, though, on the podcast on YouTube, and we do read those on Wednesdays. Tomorrow, never read the comments, but what are your thoughts on where this offensive line is? 301-230-0980. Take your calls at the top of the hour. We'll start with Ryan, though, in D.C., because he called in during while we were playing that. So, Ryan, get us started on this offensive line discussion here on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig. I really loved what Logan said because it echoed my sentiment exactly. I thought they should have taken Warren instead of Daniels. Daniels really is a smaller, more athletic guy, but he is I don't see him as a tackle because he measured in at 6'3" and 295 at the combine. You can't play tackle at that size. I mean, I really don't believe you can. Now, I don't know any NFL tackle that's less than 300 pounds. And I really wanted Warren. I looked at that round, and Friedland was on the board, but he went before Washington. Then I thought they were going to go with Warren because I thought they were going to look for a tackle. And if they didn't go with Warren, I like the kid from Maryland that went a couple of rounds later.
Jalen Duncan, yeah.
All of them natural tackles, all with the size, all with the experience. But he went for position flex guy. And, I just don't know if he can be a solid contributor this year because of, his overall lack of size right now.
Well, the thing is, though, Ryan, in fairness to them, in fairness to them, like, they're not looking for him to play this year. But what you can do to a guy is add size, and if he puts on 15 pounds and is 6'3", 310, like, that's a small-ish NFL tackle, but you can play tackle at that. What you can't teach is the foot speed that he has. And my guess is they look at him, and yes, he has position flex, I guess, but they look at him as a tackle. Ron was fairly clear about that. They're not looking to bump him inside. They think he has the foot speed to play tackle, and that the athleticism and the things that you can't teach can be molded, and they have time because he's their fourth guy right now. Like, they have two starting tackles that they're okay with, and Cornelius Lucas is their swing guy. So if you look at him as, hey, he's a fourth-round pick, he's a project, you got to admit he's an interesting project.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think his position, I agree with Logan. I think he's going to be better suited as a guard. But again, it's a matter of putting on that muscle and putting on that mass to where he have the power to be in that position. Because I've watched the guy. I'm a college football junkie, so I've watched the guy for several years. I thought he was actually bigger than he measured out at, and I thought he was going to be a reasonably good prospect in the middle rounds where he was drafted. But once he went to the combine and I saw his measurables, I was like, oh my God, this guy is not. He went from a mid-round selection in my mind to being a late pick to undrafted free agent because of his size in general. Because I just think that in today's NFL, if you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, you look at their guards, they average like 330.
Right. Well, I think of guard as a bigger position in the modern NFL than tackle, frankly. Like, I think a lot of tackles are in that 315, 320 range, and you have guards that are 330 because you're not required to play in as much space. Ryan, I'm going to let you go, but I appreciate the call. Thanks for calling in. And something else you said that I think is interesting, and, like, I'm not a college football junkie, well documented. I haven't seen him play until I watched some of the tape after they took him. But if you think he's bigger, but he measured in small at the combine, like, same thing with Emmanuel Forbes. Like, dudes lose weight in the pre-combine process because they want to run a fast time or they want to get a good shuttle time or whatever. And they can then tell a team, like, you can't tell a team, hey, if I had lost 10 pounds, I would have run a 4.3. It doesn't work like that. But you can tell a team, like, hey, my play weight last year was heavier. Like, I'm just in the off season, I'm taking off a little bit, but I'm going to put it back on when it comes time to get to the season. And I know I can do it because I've done it in the past. So count me not concerned about a smaller school player getting to an NFL weight room with NFL nutrition and NFL money to buy food, getting a little bit bigger if he needs to over the long run. Now, the foot speed and footwork are different. Your play recognition, like, there's a lot of other stuff that I think matters here more than the size that would be concerned about and why he's a fourth rounder, not a first rounder. But certainly it does play a pretty significant factor. But if you're thinking about it in terms of can he start this year, if they're on their fourth tackle, they've got bigger issues. They're in deep trouble. It's part of the reason why I typically neglect third quarterback talk. Because if your first two guys are down, of course you're screwed. You're not allowed to have three good quarterbacks. That's not how the league works, unless I guess you're the 49ers and anyone you put under center is good because Kyle Shanahan's a genius. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app. All right, that was a great start to our calls. We already got a couple more in queue. We will answer them next. Do you think the Commanders are good at O-line, or do you want to see them make another move? 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
Here's what's trending on the Team.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We have a bit of breaking news.
Breaking news. Oh, snap. News is broken. Breaking news.
Jimmy Butler out tonight for the Heat. He was obviously fantastic in Game 1. Kevin Love will have to find a new deep target. That was nuts. Anthony, were you watching that game on Sunday?
Yeah.
Watching K-Love just throw it back Wes Unseld style. Bang, bang, bang. Like 3 possessions in a row.
Yep.
What are you doing, Knicks? How'd you blow that lead? How'd you lose track of all those dudes deep? Knicks need better safety play. Hot take. So Jimmy Butler out tonight. They've already obviously won 1 game on the road. We'll see if they can get the sweep without Jimmy Butler and then ultimately head back. Do we have a word on Julius Randle? He's still out, isn't he? Or has that been not made official yet?
I haven't seen anything along those lines yet.
Okay, because he obviously missed Game 1, a game which, as previously mentioned, the Knicks lost. You got Knicks Heat tonight, and then you got Warriors Lakers late tonight, 10 o'clock tip. Those are TNT games. It's a weird schedule, actually. I was looking at this because we had Ramona Shelburne earlier in the show, and said I was like, oh, the ESPN's probably got the game tomorrow because it's Wednesday. They don't. TNT tomorrow, and then ESPN has Thursday, Friday. So they must have done a little swap-a-roo so that ESPN could get Warriors Lakers, which tips off at 9 on Thursday, a humane hour. Love that. Right now, though, talking Commanders, talking about their offensive line. Are you happy with where they're at? Are you think they're okay? Or are you like, please, for the love of whatever deity it is that you believe in, can they make a move? Let's go to the phones, 301-230-0980. Paul, you can get us started for the segment. Paul, you're on the Hoffman Show.
I think that we're right now right where we need to be. Like much of the other callers said before me, Charles Leno is better than what people give him credit for. The pickup of Wiley was a great pickup. You move Cosme to the inside at right guard, and then all you really have to do is replace that left guard that's next to because you got Nick Gates as a center. You just picked up 2 draft picks, so hopefully one of those guys can play guard and move no out there, or maybe you can go Chase Roulier. I don't know if they're going to let him go. They're going to have Tyler Lawson there. But one thing I always noticed is that, you know, they've been pretty good with coaching up the offensive line. And a lot of
Paul's got a phone monster that got him. That's unfortunate because Paul was making some good points. We like people that make good points on this show. We need to because the host doesn't. But nothing, Anthony? Didn't get anything from you on that? Are you paying attention in there?
I was pulling some sound, actually.
That's fair.
Yeah.
You're allowed to do your job. That's allowable. Here's what I would say about the offensive line play. I think, one, eventually you have to hit on your draft picks. Otherwise, you're just going to stink, right? And this is actually something that's like a bigger thought on the roster, right? So the Commanders, what are the positions that everyone screams about? 1, offensive line. Totally get it. 2, tight end. Yeah, they were not very good last year. Not very productive at all. 3, linebacker. Jamin, if he plays like he did at the end of the year all season long, I don't think people are screaming about linebacker, but that's kind of the point, is you need guys to develop. And they're going to need to have been right about Cody Barton, or that Milo Eifler or someone else can step up and play some linebacker for them. They just have no depth at the position. And still, it seems like they're missing a starter, but I think they legitimately think that Barton, who started for Seattle last year towards the end of the year and played pretty well by the end of the year, is a guy that can be a starter for them. Eventually, you have to be right. And I know everyone wants to try to get sure things, but sure things don't exist really in the NFL, and if they do, they're very expensive. And this team, their sure thing was spending on Deron Payne. And I think you can criticize that strategy and say, hey, you drafted Fedarian Mathis, you got a guy in John Ridgeway that you had no business getting your hands on because the Cowboys thought they could sneak him to the practice squad and you jumped on it because Big Phil got hurt and it worked out for you. So you got Ridgeway. You got Mathis. Obviously, those guys would be playing next to John Allen. And if you have Sweat and you have Young, then you are perfectly fine not re-signing Deron Payne and taking that $22 million or so of cap space and using it somewhere else. Although this year it's actually a much lower number. Okay, fine. If you want to make that argument, you can make that argument. But eventually you have to play the draft and develop game. There's not enough money to spend in free agency, and you only get one first-round pick. You have to be right on mid-tier free agents like Cody Barton. Not that they have to be awesome, but they have to be good enough. You have to be right on a guy like Nick Gates. Either that he is a good center and you win, or you have to be right about Stromberg. Okay, center, you've given yourselves options. That's good. But guard, like, you got to be right about a Sadiq Charles. Sadiq Charles, if I'm not mistaken, was a third-round pick. Like, I saw a comment earlier, and I don't know, Anthony, if you've heard this before. Hold on. Number 108 in the drafts. So he was, that's going to depend. He was either early fourth or late third. He would have been a comp pick at 108.
I think he was a third. But he also had, like, he was a part of that, Joe Burrow's offensive line that ended up winning the, best line in college football.
Yeah, he was a fourth rounder, so my apologies there. Okay. He's an early fourth rounder.
But did he have a higher grade, though?
A lot of people really liked him, right? But, like, my point is, whether it's, what I was going to say is someone earlier said, like, your draft is judged on your first 3 picks. And in that case, like, the Commanders draft this year is going to be fine because you got Stromberg, who's going to start, Martin, who's going to basically start, and Forbes, who's definitely going to start. But, like, okay, other second and third round picks, like Sam Cosmi has to hit. I think, like, people are overlooking that. Like, Cosmi should be a borderline Pro Bowler this year. Otherwise, you made a mistake and you should have kept him at tackle. Right? Like, if you're going to make that move and take this guy that you invested in to be your future right tackle, and you're going to bump him inside a guard, he better be awesome. Because I'd rather have him just be very good at right tackle than, like, mediocre good at right guard. And he showed he could be a good tackle if he can stay on the field. That's the thing he hasn't proven yet. So eventually you got to be right or you're just screwed anyway. And now, do you necessarily want to play that game at quarterback, or would you rather have pick 1-1 overall and beat Trevor Lawrence? Of course, but, like, how many teams get lucky like that? I mean, this year, right? If the Bears had Trevor Lawrence on the board, Justin Fields wouldn't be a Bear. Trevor Lawrence would, right? But they got the number 1 pick in a draft where the number 1 guy was Bryce Young, and is Bryce Young that much better of a prospect than Justin Fields, especially this far in with Justin Fields, what they've invested in him? Probably not. So they trade out of the pick, and Carolina's like, we'll take Bryce Young. Great. So when it comes to the Commanders and their offensive line, this is the thing that I don't really agree with when folks are like, they had to do all this crazy stuff to try to get sure thing talent. Sure thing talent doesn't really exist, and they didn't have the resources to do it. If someone had fallen to 16, great. They didn't. They didn't have the money to spend in free agency. They did what they could to get Andrew Wiley and Gates, but they didn't have $25 million a year to go after some of the guys, the Jawan Jones who moves from Jacksonville to Kansas City. They didn't have the kind of money to go after the big fish. So eventually they got to just be right. And then the other thing that I think people forget, because it's been so bad here the last 3 years, is your play calling can insulate your line in a major way. And I said this during the pod, and I'll say it again. The best thing the Commanders did for every single offensive position this year was hire Eric Bieniemy. And if they got that one wrong, if Bieniemy's not any good, the staff is toast, everybody's fired, and then we know. But they didn't have the resources to go and invest in, make splashy moves, and if they missed, and then it's up to hitting on your evals. And if they missed, well, then there's going to be new people selecting the players next year. It's Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, Anthony, I don't know if we ever filled in this part of the rundown, but I think I want to go into the Lakers-Kings series.
You mean the Lakers Warriors?
Oh yes, the Lakers Warriors series, because the Warriors trounced the Kings. That was not like a setup and a joke. That was just I said the wrong team name.
It's all good. I mean, if you were rooting for the Kings to beat the Warriors, I understand that. But
I was not.
It is the Warriors versus the Lakers.
I've been Dub Nation since 2015, bro.
I'm proud of you then.
I saw it early.
Well, so I mean, I know what side of the fence you're on. You're not on my side.
Or do you? Or do you?
Or do I?
I like being right. That's the side I like being on.
Okay.
That's why I've been on Dub Nation since 2015. But I don't know. The series, it's interesting. I guess we'll talk about it next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app.
Daniel Snyder has agreed to...
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the on the free Odyssey app, on the Team 980 YouTube page, where you just got a full Anthony Haney like body roll dance party. Good times.
Gotta love it, man. Gotta love it. It just gets me going.
Yeah. You pumped up? You think you got your energy? How much of this game are you going to watch tonight?
I'm watching every last second, millisecond, minute, hour, quarter.
Of the first half of the whole game?
The entire thing.
I applaud you and your ability to stay awake.
Because I know you will be fast asleep at 10:35.
Yeah, probably. I'm pretty tired today, bro. So, them's the breaks. Warriors, Lakers. Two all-time greats, Steph versus LeBron. Arguably the first versus the fifth best player of all time, depending on who you ask. By the way, we had promised Clinton Yates today. Initially, that was the plan. Yates going to join us in his regular spot on Friday. Had something come up. Good thing come up, but he had something come up. So we'll talk to him on Friday about where he's got Steph ranked all time. And by that point, we will have obviously two other games under our belt of more Stephen Curry action. Him, he who went for 50 points in Game 7, and just thoroughly dominated that game. And the question that I have for this series, for Lakers versus Kings, or I guess the multiple questions I have, start with who's going to be the best player in the series. Obviously, in terms of peak powers, who's the best player right now? Steph is the best player in the series. But on any given night, it is very possible for Anthony Davis to be that. LeBron still has it in him. And then, Clay can obviously supplement on any given night and really could be the best player. If he has one of those nights where he hits 10 threes, which he still does once every 6 to 8 weeks, let's call it, and it feels like he might be a little bit due, then Clay can have a kind of game where he's a dominant force. Draymond can be dominant. But game in, game out, it is going to be probably Steph Curry or Anthony Davis who's the best player in the series. And if it's Davis, the Lakers have a chance. I feel very comfortable saying that LeBron James is going to be very, very excellent for, let's call it 5 of 6 games if you think it's going to go 6, 6 of 7 if you think it's going to go 7. He probably has one night where he has a pedestrian 22, 8, and 8, as if that's at all remotely pedestrian. But for LeBron, fine. Other than that, he'll be between 25 and 40 points. He'll have between 8 and 15 rebounds, and he'll have between 6 and 14 assists. Like, that's who LeBron is going to be. If Anthony Davis has a night or a couple of nights where he's got 38 and 16, then the Lakers are going to be in all right shape in this series. He also has an ability to affect the Warriors defensively that is totally different than anything they faced against the Kings. And I don't know whether that's going to be enough, but that's the part of the game that I expect Davis to be consistent with. And that's why I think, whether he is just great defensively or he is great all around is probably the single biggest determining factor on who wins this series. Because, Davis can guard 1 through 5. He also has an ability, as the Grizzlies found out, to just destroy your 2-point game. So some of the layups and things that even Steph is one of the best and most creative finishers in the league got against Sacramento is just not going to be available against the Lakers because Davis won't let it. He will block those shots or alter them that Steph's percentage drops precipitously. Which does make me wonder, too, how they... do you just try to get him involved in pick and roll? That's one of the things I would be considering if I'm Steve Kerr is, as crazy as it sounds, I would get Davis involved in pick and rolls. Especially if he's going to guard Draymond. I think there's a chance he spends more time on Looney. And can Looney, have the offensive rebound impact that he was able to have against one of the best rebounders in the NBA in Domas Sabonis in the regular season against Davis? I doubt it. Davis is just tougher. But that's another thing. But if you can, either with Looney or Draymond, pull Davis away from the basket and open up the lane, now you let guys like Wiggins and Green attack off of cuts, and now you're back in business at the rim. It does have the risk, obviously, of pulling the NBA's arguably best defender into the action, which doesn't seem very smart. But it's that, or just, he's kind of lurking in the background. Do you trust, if you're the Lakers, you'd probably trust him to guard Steph on switches if you want to switch that pick and roll. But does that put him at risk of foul trouble? The Lakers, for whatever it's worth, have been bizarrely effective at drawing fouls and preventing for themselves from fouling. They are far and away the best team in the NBA in terms of free throw attempts, and I believe they were also the best team. If they weren't, they were the second best team. I'm forgetting the stat off the top of my head in terms of free throws allowed. They don't foul. Some people think that's a conspiracy, and the NBA is trying to look out for the Lakers. They have good, smart defenders. And they have a bunch of guys, and especially like these stats, obviously regular season would include the 50-plus games that Russell Westbrook was there. They have a bunch of guys who drive and get downhill and know how to draw fouls. Davis, LeBron obviously knows how to draw fouls. Westbrook knows how to draw fouls and gets downhill a lot. So it is completely unsurprising that is the case based off pure basketball, which also leads to, when you flip the court the other way, when you flip the court the other way, I'll just mention real quickly, can the Warriors stay out of foul trouble? If Steph is guarding D'Angelo Russell, can he do that effectively if they choose to attack that? But also, LeBron is going to try to attack and get Steph in switches and then, or try to pick his pick and roll matchup based off who Steph is guarding, try to get that switch and then let LeBron attack Steph going downhill and try to pick up fouls on Curry and get him out of the game. So that's kind of the chess match you got going back and forth is when the Warriors have the ball, what do they do with Davis? Do they try to get him involved in pick and rolls to try to pull him away from the rim? Or do you try to keep him as far away from the ball as possible and limit his effectiveness? And, maybe you kind of going with the mindset that we're going to attack and pick and roll 4 threes. We're going to hunt threes in a way that we didn't against the Kings. We're really ferocious in attacking the paint. If you're the Lakers on the other side of the floor, I think you just relentlessly attack Steph and pick and roll and hope that it works. And that is kind of ultimately the breaking point to me of the series. And I think Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson have a kind of a great bit on the broadcast with Mike Breen where Michael asks them keys to the game, and it's like, well, you have to, and Jeff will be like, well, you do this or you do that. And then, Mike Breen will go, well, what happens if that doesn't work? And Mark Jackson chimes in and says, you lose. The you lose point of the series is if you can't attack Steph Curry and pick and roll, and he doesn't get tired from you continually doing that, you're just probably going to lose. You have to find ways to take him out of the game because of the level he's playing at and his importance to the team, to the Warriors. I mentioned this yesterday when I talked about how effective he's been over this 10-year roughly prime of his. They're 14 points better per 100 possessions when he is on the floor over like a 9-year stretch. That's insane productivity that massively affects winning. In the Warriors' Game 7 win, they were plus 25 when Curry was on the floor. Like, they are a different team with him out there. And so if you can get him in foul trouble and wear him down over the course of the series because LeBron James is attacking him and pick and roll after pick and roll and getting him to switch, and he gets stuck on LeBron a ton and picks up a foul, then great. But the risk is you then lose rhythm with your other guys because you're so busy hunting that. Steph has improved so much since that happened to him in 2016 in the finals, both in how he can avoid those situations and how he plays without fouling when he gets in them, that ultimately they try that too much. They don't really have a lot of other offense going otherwise. Davis is not involved enough. D'Angelo Russell doesn't get involved enough. And they can't score with the Warriors, who I think will be able to get the shots that they are used to getting on the other end because they're them and they're excellent at doing it. I will mention one other guy real quick, and then we'll talk about the rest of the playoffs when we get back and take your calls on this series. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. because he's a local lad, kind of, Rui Hachimura might be in for a rude awakening in this series. He was awesome in round one. And it's the kind of thing where you look at and you go, damn, man, where was that when you were here with some level of consistency? But the defensive ask against the Grizzlies was pretty minimal. The defensive ask, the cutting, the communication that's required, the awareness of where Steph and Clay are at all times, Jordan Poole, if he gets hot. God, if they get a good Jordan Poole series, that's also a game changer, but I'm not holding my breath for that at this point. But all of the mental strain that goes into and the mental demand that goes into playing the Warriors, and not to mention they have Andrew Wiggins, they have Moses Moody, they have Gary Payton II, they have all these lengthy wing guys, Draymond, who will have no problem with Rui guarding him. Like, I think this could be a rough series for Hachimura. And that's the other thing too, right? Is like the Warriors have a guy like Jonathan Kuminga who didn't really play at all against the Kings. He can come in and have a massive series against the Lakers. So these are the adjustments to watch for, but ultimately it comes down to who's the best player game in, game out in this series. Is it Curry dropping 35, 8, and 8 every single night, having major impact, getting to play close to 40 minutes? Or is it Anthony Davis scoring 35, grabbing 16 rebounds, and being the menace that we know he will be defensively? It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. When we get back, James Harden and the rest of the NBA's playoffs this week. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, I got a computer issue. I don't know I think I knocked something loose over here. What do we got? A little plug in. I had to plug in my laptop, and all of a sudden I hit this keyboard, and then next thing I know, it's all gone.
Black screen, I see.
Yeah. Oh, there's a power button on this keyboard. Did I?
Yeah.
I'm scared to. Let's see. That's attached to that. Attached to. I think it's this one. If I disappear from the stream, then we know what happened. 3, 2, 1. I'm still here.
Craig is still here.
I'm still here. Computer's not. So that's a bummer. Probably should fix that before Real Things.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look at that, because that's the Real Things computer.
Yeah.
That's where the real things. See, right? This computer right here. That's the one that the real things, the real people said in the real microphones.
Yep.
Comes out of. So Joel Embiid's doubtful for Game 2. That's the bad news for Philadelphia. The good news for them is, man, James Harden was awesome last night. Big old comeback by the Sixers. Wild play down the stretch where the Celtics just literally throw the ball to Tyrese Maxey. And Maxey's like, I guess I'm going to go dunk it now. See ya. Bye. And, Harden seals it with a 3. Gets his switch, step back. It was vintage James Harden. But it actually wasn't. And that's the thing that I think was really impressive last night. Oh, hey, look, the computer's back. That was really impressive about Harden last night. He took a lot of criticism. They obviously won their opening round series, and that's great. Much better than the alternative. And they look dominant. They look like the best team in the Eastern Conference in the first round. But the thing that Harden struggled with in the first round was finishing at the rim. And it just looks like he can't quite elevate the same way that he used to. Well, last night going into the game, James Harden apparently had a very different plan, because he just consistently would get most of the way to the rim and pull up. And that was something that I didn't really know he had in his game. It makes sense. But, you think about James Harden, and he's like the epitome of Morey ball, right? Like, we got to get layups. We got to get threes. And instead, last night, he found a way to be super efficient while taking a lot of 2s that weren't layups. And that, to me, was the difference in the game. Like, that strategic play by Harden to understand where the strengths and weaknesses of the Knicks were and his own limitations at this point in his career unlocked his ability to score 45 and do it, by the way, in a pretty efficient manner. I'm trying to pull up the box score real quick, but it's not like he took 1,000 shots. I mean, he took 30, but he shot over 50%. He shot 50% from 3, and he still had 6 assists. So it's not the James Harden that we've seen where he's 22 and 10, but he basically absorbs Embiid's shots. And Anthony, it was a really, really impressive performance, because they needed to play that way last night, and he was able to do it.
Yeah, I think ultimately everybody want to see James Harden get back to who he was in Houston. And I think he said it perfectly in the post game. He's just doing what he has to do for the team. So obviously, Joel Embiid being out, he's going to have to take on a bigger role. And, he lived up to the moment. They going to Boston. They still won on the road. But ultimately, him being able to hit shots consistently, be more aggressive, I think that's only going to be a positive for, Philly as they move forward, because guess what? He gets a little bit more confident. Then you already got Tyrese Maxey, him stepping up, Tobias Harris getting on a roll. The only person I will want to see, get more involved is PJ Tucker. This guy played 37 minutes and did not get a one field goal attempt.
That's crazy. They clearly
37 minutes, no field goal attempt.
In the scouting report was close out on Tucker corner 3s.
Yes.
But here's the thing. Like, they shot last night 50% from the field.
They shot well.
right? And part of that is decision making. Like that's the things, that I don't know always gets really talked about in good analysis, or talked about in analysis. It's what separates good analysis from bad analysis. It's like, oh, they shot 42% from the field. This is terrible. This is awful. How they got to make more shots. And it's like sometimes you got to make more shots, but sometimes you got to take better shots. And part of what Harden did last night, and part of what Harden does for this team in general, is Harden dictates who gets to shoot. And he has, when he plays like he did last night, when he plays as Houston Harden, he does that more than any player in the NBA. I mean, there were years, I want to pull this up real quick, but there were years that it felt like his usage percentage was like 40% or something like that. And usage percentage is the stat that determines what percent of possessions end in a shot for you, an assist for you, a turnover for you. And so, come on, internet. Now's not the time. Also, we don't need Windows updates. The computer is back though, so that's very exciting. All right, here we go. Now we got Harden's stuff up. We need his advanced. Thank you. Usage percentage. Yeah. 2018, 2019 in Houston, this dude had a 40.5% usage rate. 40.5%. That means 40% of Houston Rockets possessions when he was on the floor ended with him either shooting, a pass leading directly to an assist, or a turnover. So that doesn't include like Harden pass to someone, they missed shot. If it's a missed shot by another player and there's no assist on it, that doesn't even count. 40%. That's got to be the highest number in NBA history. That or one of Kobe's seasons. But like you compare that to where he is this year, it's only 25% of possessions. Why? Because he dictates that Joel Embiid gets more shots. And those shots are going to come in situations where he's not necessarily going to exist or going to assist. And so watching Harden manipulate the game like that is a reminder of like how brilliant that dude is, even if it's taken a very different form for most of the year.
Fantastic, man. That's all I can say. Fantastic.
By the way, are you old enough to remember the NBA? It's fantastic commercials.
Sir?
You have no idea what I'm talking about.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Can we talk about the Celtics and how they collapsed sort of kind of down the stretch?
It's not good, man. They were not very good in clutch games this year, or close games this year.
Terrible.
Like their clutch time numbers, pick one, clutch or crunch. They weren't good. And a lot of them, like, I was listening to Zach Lowe late in the season on this, and he said, a lot of it is just like Jason Tatum missed pull-up shots.
And that's exactly what it was yesterday. They relied so heavily on Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown took 3 shots after the first quarter. He had 12 points in the first quarter. Only had 3 shots after that. And I think that's a guy they got to lean more on in these clutch situations. Personally, I like Brown in the clutch more over Tatum. But Tatum is the team's best player, so you got to pick your poison.
Yeah, I mean, Tatum, 39 points on the night. It's hard to be too mad at him.
Yeah.
But, like, he's got to – I mean, that's been a thing all year. Like, if you're going to take mid-range shots in clutch situations, you got to make them. Harden did. Tatum didn't. Harden also made a couple threes, and that was that. I agree with you. They could definitely use Brown more in those situations. But, like, Tatum's one of the best ISO players in the league.
Yep.
And so –
You got 2 of them, though.
Yeah, sometimes you live and die by your best player. But it's the kind of thing, too, like, depending on the matchup, if the other team's best defender is going to be on Tatum, it's the old, like, do you want to put your number 1 corner on number 1 wide receiver type of thing? Or do you like, hey, our number 2, like if you're Washington and Terry's got an all-pro corner on him all day, just go to Jahan because that dude's basically almost, is close enough to being as good that the gap between him and his competition is greater and it's worth exploiting. So there's that. Meanwhile, real quick in the Western Conference, Phoenix is in trouble.
Trouble.
Which, like, makes sense because they've barely played together and Denver's sick. Denver's the number 1 seed. They have outside of the Warriors starters, like the next many lineups combinations in the NBA this year in terms of plus minus, how much do you actually outscore your opponent? Were like all Nuggets lineups. They have, and the thing I think with this matchup that's pretty fascinating is they have guys that can guard the Suns guys. For all the defensive worries that we had about the Nuggets, like Aaron Gordon is as good of an option on Kevin Durant as there is maybe in the entire league because he's almost just as big. He's super long. He's stronger than Durant, and he's freakishly athletic. And athletic in a way that matters on defense because you have plenty of athletic dudes who barely can't slide their feet. But Aaron Gordon can, and he cares about that end of the floor. You have guys who can, make Devin Booker's life hard enough, but Booker's not enough. Like, Booker was awesome last night, but, Chris Paul now out obviously does not help that. If I'm the Suns, like, you're just hoping that KD plays better and that you get production from other guys and Ayton, but I was stunned not just at, like, the thorough dominance from Denver in that fourth quarter, but the game flow overall, the way the Nuggets are able to play at this much slower pace and make it work for them. A game finished 97-87. Neither team scored 100 points. It's the Nuggets and the Suns.
A lot of defense.
If that's a regular season game, they probably play in the 150s.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and I just hate for Chris Paul. I hate this for Chris Paul because, he is getting up there in age, and, his days in the NBA are numbered for real. And
it's every year at this point, man.
For him to go out with another injury growing, I mean, you probably have more expert analysis on, the growing and things of that nature. But I don't think he plays the rest of this series. So,
I got nothing on the injury.
Oh, okay.
Because I know enough that speculating is fruitless. I mean, those are tricky injuries. I guess I have that much, right? Like, adductor is a tricky injury. If he pulled something, like, that's the kind of thing where, could you play through it? You could, depending on exactly how much pain it is, but you're going to have to really manage it. And, if you got Jamal Murray coming at you and some of these other quick Nuggets guards, like, you got to be able to slide your feet. And if you can't do that, then you're going to be hurting your team more than you're helping being out there.
Yeah, but I think that ultimately, the Suns need more offense. They roll out a lot of guys that play defense. You got Torrey Craig coming off the bench, Ish Wainwright coming off the bench. Those guys play defense. You need points if you're going to be able to compete against the Nuggets. And ultimately, Kevin Durant, D-Book won't be enough. So
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They don't have depth. They traded their depth for Kevin Durant. And unless Durant and Booker are going to combine to score about 80, 90. They're in trouble. They're in trouble. But that's the thing. Like, you shouldn't lose a game when you have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, in which you hold the other team to 97.
Yep.
And they lost by 10.
Kevin Durant got to be better.
Yeah. Certainly going to be an interesting couple weeks here as we steamroll towards the conference finals.
But we've seen teams go down 2-0 before.
We
just saw the Warriors.
That's also very true. Like, I was watching the game. Of course, I was watching the highlights and everything back this morning. You think I stayed up for that game? Hell
no.
Game started like 10 o'clock. Night-night.
10-10.
Yeah. Stephen Curry called. He said, night-night. But, Rachel was like, wow, I can't believe that. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty stunning. But also, like, they haven't done anything yet. All they did was win their 2 games at home. That said, you go on the road and win game 3, and the series is basically over. So you have done something, but it's not an insurmountable hole for Phoenix as they head back for game 3. All right, when we get back here on the Hoffman Show, real things, real people said into real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Wrapping up on the free Odyssey app as well. Streaming live, youtube.com/at the Team 980. Appreciate everyone checking out the stream. It's growing every single day, Anthony. That's all I can say. The stream is growing every single day. If you're streaming us live, maybe checking us out for the first time, make sure you're subscribed to the Team 980 page so that you miss, or if you miss any part of the show. I know it's hard to watch all 3 hours every single day, but I mean, if you do, you get a bonus prize. We don't charge you. That's the prize. Okay, we don't. Never mind. People get the joke.
It is free 99.
Bang. Actually, if you watch, Anthony, that's actually the prize. If you watch for all 3 hours, it's free 98.
Okay.
Yeah, it's discounted.
Yes, sir.
Good value. Anyway, the point is, we do put up highlights of the show as well, which you can watch if you subscribe to the Team 980's YouTube page. All right. This is the way we end the show each and every day. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is time for Real Things Real People Said into Real Microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be so this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Still funny every single time.
Every time.
I was there.
Oh, you were actually there.
I was there for the press conference. I was there for the Culture is Damn Good press conference.
I was there for the Happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, Happy Thanksgiving. Ron was there.
Yeah. I think I was there for that one. Yeah, I was there for Ron's intro presser. We should. Now I'm like, do we have to go back and redo the Real Things Open? Because that still is pretty good. Nah, we'll just let Dan's presence trail off. Bruce is as close as we'll get.
Yep.
Anyway, you're going to have to explain this one to me, Anthony. Actually, well, we'll save the Pat Bev one for tomorrow. News of the day in the NBA is Dylan Brooks. Shams reported that Dylan Brooks is not going to be welcomed back to the Grizzlies, quote, under any circumstances, which is a great excuse to bring back this gem from the Draymond Green podcast about a month ago. Draymond talking about Dylan Brooks. Oh, it's so good.
This idiot said, I don't know what Draymond.
Just hold on. He just starts off with,
this idiot said.
Honestly, Anthony, can we cut that and put that on the board?
Of course.
Because I feel like that's one that I need for myself.
This idiot said, I don't know what Draymond does out there. He said, I don't like Draymond at all. You don't know me. I just don't like Golden State. I quite frankly wouldn't like a team that beats me all the time either. I don't like anything to do with them. Quite frankly, you were a little kid in high school watching us win championships. Should be happy that you even witnessed that. Or maybe college, but you get the point. You're a fan. Draymond talks a lot. You talk a lot now, so if you have 4 rings, sure, you talk a lot more. For All-Stars, you probably talk a bit more. Defensive Player of the Year, you for damn sure would talk more. 2 Olympic gold medals, you definitely would be talking. His game is cool. If you ever wondered why the Memphis Grizzlies is not ready to compete for a championship, look no further than this idiot right here. They're actually depending on this guy to help them win a championship. And he says his game is cool. Quite frankly, that just shows how little you know about basketball. And yet, you running around talking about a dynasty? The dynasty starts after you, not with you.
And that, I just imagine if I'm the Memphis Grizzlies GM, pulling Dylan Brooks into his exit meeting and being like, Dylan, this is kind of what we think about you.
This idiot said, I don't know what Draymond does out there.
It's like, yeah, man, you should probably figure out all this stuff. And this is just, the end of this is just, honestly, chef's kiss perfect.
You know about basketball. And yet, you running around talking about a dynasty? The dynasty starts after you, not with you.
And that's what the Grizzlies have told Dylan Brooks. See ya. Our dynasty starts after you, not with you. And I 100% think that is the right move because I do think he legitimately holds them back. I am fascinated to see if he signs anywhere. I think he will. I think someone will take him on. But, man, he was real bad. All right, we'll see you tomorrow on the Hoffman Show on Team 980.
Daniel Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders.